When you're choosing a career path, that honestly means a lot of different things, especially in today's world when there's so many different routes you can go. So there's still the traditional route which exists and they are tried and true and they are good options for people. And then there's the non-linear routes in which the career you have is not defined by one industry and one field for your entire life. Instead, you jump around from field to field, you accumulate skills, and you forge your own path. And the thing is, that's a decision that we all have to come to at some point in time is, are we going to follow a traditional route? Are we going to go the nonlinear route? Or are we going to do some combination of both of them? So with that, keeping everything simple, let's start talking about how to choose your career when you're uncertain about what the future might hold for you. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow learner, Michael Klucas. And on this show, we boil down complex topics into simple, actionable tips. I'm choosing to launch into the topic of careers and vocation a lot more fully, especially because if you've been following my unemployment journal and everything on Instagram, so KES Studios _, then you would know that I've actually got another job now, which is an administrative position where I haven't had one in a while, aside from the recruitment position, where I was doing mainly administrative work. So a lot of bookkeeping, a lot of filing and paper pushing. And the thing is, that is for me what I view to be a stepping stone in my non-linear career, because I'm trying to plan more for the future and think through more of my long-term objective, my long-term goals here of what career do I want to have and how are these skill sets going to aid in the creation of that career. Distinctly right now, it's more so the question of how am I going to pad up my resume, my experience, so that way I can continue on to higher level roles and higher level positions in the future while having that sweet, cohesive work history and tenure that a lot of higher level positions tend to look for alongside experience and specialization. And that does mean ultimately I'm going down an uncertain path here, and that can be scary. So that's why I wanted to talk about the traditional routes and the nonlinear paths, because all of us have different levels of interest and different risk tolerance in choosing our routes. So first and foremost, how do I even define what a career is? So this is something that we probably all asked ourselves at some point or another throughout our lives. And the simplest way that I can describe this is the fact that a career is a series or a collection of jobs and experiences that you've personally had. And a simple example could be something like a doctor, in which your career is accumulation of the years you're putting into schooling, and then from there it is going in as like a junior doctor, and then probably as like a senior doctor, and then a specialist, and then whatever comes after that. But there's a pretty general progression. Or investment banking is the other thing that comes to mind, where you kind of go in, you're an entry-level investment banker, and then you can become an investment accountant. At least I think that's the role, in which you're helping other people manage their money, and then you become a partner, and it just has a clear linear progression. So you would be able to see, what does my career path look like based off of the industry, people I know within the industry, and just the general principles of that field. And then that is when it becomes, again, a series of jobs and experiences that you've personally collected and gained over time and over the amount of time you spent within that certain field. The thing is, you aren't tied to only one career, ever. So that's why the example of the non-linear career exists pretty well. Like, there might be jobs and fields that you're personally in. You may be working in them for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe even more. And then you can switch fields, and they may seem completely unrelated. They may seem like kind of a, out of left field change or deviation. But the thing is, those all experiences that you are compiling and stockpiling over time. And that's when the career, again, still takes that same definition of a series of jobs and experiences. However, it's non-linear and a little bit more non-traditional. But that also is by no means bad. There's a book which I'll link to below called The Squiggly Career. Ali Abdaal, on his Deep Dive podcast, had interviewed the author of that book, and I'd highly recommend you check it out as well if you're really diving into this topic and this idea of what career do you want, how do you decide and craft your own career for your own personal fulfillment and joy, and at the same time, what does that look like? What do some of the other nonlinear paths look like versus the linear path? Because both of them, again, are viable routes. And I don't want you to feel that you have to only go the tried and true route or the tried and true career path. Because there's so many new opportunities that exist in our world today that didn't exist 10 years ago, 20 years ago. What certainly makes this hard, though, in choosing that career path when you are uncertain is just the fact that it can cause so much anxiety. You probably have heard this question when you're graduating high school, when you're graduating college, when you maybe leave trade school. You're usually asked, what's next? What are you doing next? Where are you going to go? What jobs do you have? And, most people at some point get tapped out when they are asked so much of what's next, because we want to know too. It'd be great. So some of us are able to plot out our entire next 5 years, next 10 years, and do so consistently with ease. And that's good. For someone that's able to do that, it's awesome to have a goal to work towards. And then for others of us who have more uncertain paths where we're not sure what route we're going to go down, it can cause a lot of anxiety and some frustration when we're asked all the time of what's next, and not understanding, or people may not understand, that uncertainty is perfectly normal. The uncertainty that comes after graduation or after a big change in your life is normal, because even those who are plotting out the next 5 years, there's no telling what truly will happen within those 5 years. And we can't plan for everything. We're not like Kuro of the Thousand Plans from One Piece. It's trying to do our best to normalize that uncertainty and get comfortable with the uncomfortability of it, because that's what's vital towards the discovery of our career, as well as just the overall happiness and fulfillment of our lives. So the uncertainty is normal, and I don't want you to feel like that's a bad thing. But that also means then the power is in your hands to craft the career that you want and to find out where your passion and your callings lie. And now I understand there's a lot of hesitation here, because when you are going down an unclear path or an uncertain path, then that in of itself can feel like a big deviation. And that's when, as I mentioned earlier, going down the traditional or nonlinear paths is also understanding yourself and your own risk tolerance, because sure, a nonlinear path does require some level of a higher risk tolerance to be able to navigate it with a bit more, I would say, confidence, but also just a bit more excitement and curiosity. Because for those who like the planning, like that kind of certainty that comes with the traditional route, which again is not bad by any means, it's to each their own. It's different strokes for different folks. There's a lot of ways you can say that. But ultimately, it's also then just the idea that the secure path is good. And they are tried and true, as I said. And because of that, we do need people in those roles. And that's why you shouldn't feel discouraged if that's what you want to pursue. Some of my friends are actively pursuing traditional routes. And for myself, I'm doing a hybrid where I'm using traditional routes for now until I have the means, the foundation to deviate out and use the things I'm building now, like this podcast, like the YouTube channel, like the consulting, and forge my own nonlinear path from there. Something else, though, that does come up fairly frequently is for people to feel that they can't change paths, or they can't leave a certain role, a certain career, because they sunk so much of their time and their life into it. And I understand that. It's hard to walk away from something that you've put so much time, effort, and energy into. Time is the one resource in our lives that we're never going to get more of. You aren't able to get back that 1 minute. You aren't able to get back those 5 minutes because once you've spent them, they are gone. And so that's where that risk, or not risk, but that fear of everything you put into something becoming a waste does end up constraining a lot of people to go down one path that they may not like. They may hate it actually, but they've ended up in that certain path, that certain career, and they don't feel they can get out of it. And so this is the sunk cost fallacy, which is because of all the time that you've put into a certain effort, a certain career, a certain job, that you have to stick it out because of all the effort and energy you put into it. However, that in of itself is a limiting belief because that means you are limiting yourself to that one option just because of things you've already done. Efforts that aren't in vain, but the efforts that are now gone anyways. So you don't want to stay in a job and a career that you hate, that's toxic, that drains you of all your extra energy to lead a life that you love and craft a career you enjoy. You want to then be able to get beyond that limitation of the sunk cost and move towards your own path of passion, interest, and curiosity. And it's very much so like Gary Vee says, in which if you are in a job that you hate, if you're in a career path that you hate, if it's toxic, it's abusive, it's draining, it's not cohesive with the life that you want to lead, then move. You have that power, you have that ability, and if you're looking for permission, you have that permission. And it's one of those very hard decisions and crossroads that some of us will come to in our lives of what are we going to do to actually get back on track to leading a life that means something more to us. Because ultimately, your career is what you are going to make of it. One other problem that tends to arise pretty frequently, though, throughout this conversation about careers and jobs and our vocation is that we don't know what we want to do. And this is not uncommon. Again, same thing as the uncertainty is normal. A lot of us may end up reaching that point where we are trying to make that decision, or at least take that first step towards what might be a potential career, potential job path, and we're just not certain what we want to do. And again, that's normal. It's not a, wow, I can't believe you don't know what you want to do from the age of 6 years old. You don't have your entire life planned out. It's nothing like that. Instead, it's just the fact that you are growing as an individual, and there's so much that will change in your life as you grow into who you're meant to be. And what you want to do, again, comes down to just following interest, following curiosity, what you're passionate about, what you're interested in, because you don't want to do something that you have no interest in whatsoever. And just because you're like, ooh, some people get into like finances or computer science because they're thinking it's a good route, it's a high paying field, high paying jobs. With the AI boom going on right now, I'll definitely have the ability, if I become like a software engineer or an AI engineer, but then they may completely hate that space and hate that field, and there's no need for them to stick it out just because of one particular outcome that could occur. And so it's about testing the waters according to your own interest and your own passion. So I emphasize following your interest and your curiosity so much because of that being the guidepost that will help clarify what you may be called to do, what you may want to do. If you're taking time to gather data, if you're taking time to gather insight and clarity into what you actually like and what might be a feasible career path for you, that itself will be a much more sustainable route. And at the same time, it will make it a lot more, I would say, enjoyable in the long run if you are following what's actually interesting. And that, again, includes just testing the waters in different areas. And that, again, will look different for everybody because everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different. Everyone's interests will be a little bit different. So you want to gather as much data as possible for yourself on yourself and see what works best. One of the simplest strategies that I tend to recommend to people when they're trying to decide what to do at a crossroads is to think back to the ages of like 10 to 15 years old. What were your interests? What were your curiosities? Because a lot of who we are, again, is formed in our youth, in our young adulthood lives. And if you're able to see how those interests or how those curiosities and passions have merged with who you are today, that itself can be an awesome way of getting more clarity and finding better viable routes to allow you to do things that you like, to allow you to find things that you enjoy. So I recommend trying out that exercise, which is just writing down about 5 to 10 things from that age range of 15 to 10 or 10 to 15 years old, and deciding what were some key moments, what were some key experiences, and what were some key places of interest that allowed me, or that I see today, that I can follow in the future as well. Because you're multidimensional, and so you're gonna have a couple of them, but it all comes down to, again, not letting yourself be constrained by this idea of I'm in one career path only, or that my career path is all I am, because you are multidimensional, and your purpose, your career, your vocation, whatever you want to call it, is also going to be multidimensional. And just getting clarity on that will make your life so much more fulfilling. And along with doing that 10 to 15-year-old limitless test, I highly recommend that you don't constrain yourself to, I have to only do this type of work, or I have to only do this type of job because that's where the interest aligned. A good example I have is for myself. I loved performing as a child, and I still do to this day. So I did every talent show I could growing up. I did America's Got Talent like 3 or 4 times. I did American Idol once. And this is me going out and performing because getting to sing, getting to dance was so much fun. And then seeing how that parlayed itself into my courses in university and in community college, it was then seeing, wow, I actually like public speaking. Like the second highest fear ever. Some people fear it more than death of public speaking. I enjoy. This is fun. That's weird. But seeing how that connection is related to the experience of performing, the experience of getting to stand on the stage and put on a show for people, or to show something to the world that I feel could be of value, then that in of itself is how I realize doing public speaking, doing workshops, or trying to be a consultant might be a viable route for myself. And I get to test the waters and see, is that the route I want to go? Good example is I'm doing this podcast now where, for the most part, I'm pretty casually talking about my experiences and trying to help relay that to someone who might be a couple steps from where I am today. They might be a couple years younger, they might be a couple years older, but wanting to get some new direction. But ultimately, it comes down to me wanting to share this with a larger audience and be able to perform this more or less to people that want to lend an ear. And that's where the connection comes in. And it's all about finding those extra connections and just seeing how you're going to use them today, or what you can even do, or what you're even doing right now that relates to it. If you've followed the self-development space, then you probably have heard the term a growth mindset, and that is also something that you really should adopt in your overall career search. Again, a career is only a collection of jobs and experiences, but the key factor here is that hopefully the career that you're choosing and the jobs that you're falling into are things that you're interested in, passionate about, and curious about. And that you aren't limiting yourself to, oh, I'm only this type of role, or I'm only this title. Instead, you're using these experiences to connect the dots and allow yourself to grow beyond just what your title or just what your position is. The more you practice this idea of drawing connections between different jobs, the more you're going to be able to get beyond that limiting belief of I can only do this, or I'm only meant to do this, and allow yourself to see how you're going to formulate a new opportunity based on where you're currently at. So adopting a growth mindset will make sure, again, that sunk cost fallacy isn't holding you back and allowing yourself to move beyond just what's already there and finding a route or finding an option that makes the most sense for you in the current chapter of your life that you're in. Because again, a 22-year-old who just graduated university, has no kids, is able to live with 5 roommates and, eat like they did in college, no one's going to bat an eye, is going to be very different than the 40-year-old who has maybe 2-3 kids, a car payment, a mortgage, insurance to pay, and all these other factors. So your chapters are going to look very different, but allowing yourself to be able to move beyond what could be limitations for yourself, because your biggest enemy is going to be your own mindset in finding new opportunities to elevate and move yourself forward. And I want to emphasize again the idea of following your curiosity. I don't mean just jumping ship the second something gets boring. So just like working out, you're going to reach plateaus at certain points in time. So you may be making a lot of progress in one area because we like things that we're good at. And then at some point you may hit a wall, and that may make you feel like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should just change the next interest. And that's not necessarily wrong at times, but ultimately that means you have tried to push that plateau, or you have worked through it and you've decided, maybe this isn't what I want to do. What you should be doing when following your curiosity, so after that 10, 15-year-old limitless test, is you should be looking at the data, testing and gathering it as you go to figure out, is this really what I want to do? Is this really what's going to drive me to keep doing my best, even in the low moments or the plateaus when it may not be as fun? Because for every job that you have, there's going to be pieces you like, there's going to be parts you don't like, and that's okay. And this is where I emphasize again that the overall career should be something that you're interested in, something you're passionate about that makes sense, but you may not love every aspect of it, and that's okay. And plus, as I go through and explain the following curiosities, I want y'all to remember that, and this goes for anything in the personal development, self-development space, is what works for me may not work for you, and that's okay. That's the whole point of testing and gathering insight into what direction you want to go. So for myself, I'm looking towards a nonlinear path because of the life that I envision for myself in the future and the life I want to give to my future family. And at the same time, what are the small steps I can do today to get myself there? And that works for me. However, it may not work for someone else who may want, again, that more secure route sooner for different reasons. So anything in terms of personal development space, anything in terms of the career space, take with a grain of salt and only really adopt it after you've tested it for yourself. And I honestly encourage you, please test out your curiosities before you jump ship and see what it looks like at the highs and see what it looks like at the lows. So that way and the weight of a what if is always going to be worse than a have done. And make sure that you guys actually comment below, what has your career path looked like? Have you gone the traditional route, or are you on the nonlinear path, or have you done some hybrid of both? Because I want to make sure that we are showing that there's different routes out there and that there are people that maybe have done something similar to what you want to do. So learn from them. So comment your answers to that down below on this YouTube video. And ultimately, again, your career is what you make of it. And it is just a collection of jobs and experiences. So don't let yourself be limited just by what you've done. Instead, follow interest, follow passion, gather data, see what works, see what doesn't, and continue to refine that process. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and like this episode. It helps share the podcast with other people and helps out the YouTube algorithm. If you're listening to this on a podcast app of choice, make sure you leave us a rating. It again helps other people discover the show. Have an amazing day. You're amazing people. I will see you all in the next episode. Go out there and do great things.